Hey, so I'm Larry Pointe-Jour. Let's talk about the cardiovascular system. So blood is composed of three parts. We have the blood plasma, which is mostly water, and then we have the white blood cells and leukocytes, which make up about a percent of the blood volume, and those are responsible for the immune response and other things inside of the blood flow. And then we have the red blood cells, which carry oxygen and other things all the way around the body and to the tissues. And so we know that blood moves from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. And so the thickness of the blood plays an important role in that, in getting the blood to be more fluid and travel easily through the body. Okay, so in order to get an idea of some of the proteins that are floating in the blood, we can take a look at when there is a what I call a leak, or when there is an injury where we're starting to lose blood and our blood volume and blood pressure starts to go down. So when that happens, when there's a cut, there's a leak, there's bleeding involved, you have a process of hemostasis that takes place. The first step you can see in the image is vasoconstriction. The blood vessel, which is made of muscle, is going to start to constrict and try to plug that leak, or to try to make that area smaller so they can get blood components to rush there. And then the second step is to form the platelet plug. The platelets that are swimming in the blood, they start to accumulate around that injury, and they start to plug the leak. And then the third step, which involves the red blood cell and another protein, fibrin, starts to gather around the cut, and it starts to build a more dense plug at the injury site. All right, so then we start to get into typing of blood. The biggest application of this is when there are blood transfusions. So when someone has lost a great volume of their blood and it needs to be replaced, what's going to happen in that sense is we're going to try to find someone with a similar type of blood and to get that blood into the person that was injured. And so, in order to do that, we have to match the particular blood that's been lost. And so, we want to find a person that matches one of the four blood types, and that'll be type A, type B, type AB, and type O. And another factor that's in the works there is the RH factor. And that's when you start to hear people talk about an O positive person or an O negative person. The plus or minus at the end of that, that indicates the additional factor that you need to consider when you're matching people with blood type. And there's one, and these blood types are made, the groups are formed because of the antigens that are on the outside of the red blood cell. And so group A has a certain type of antigen, group B has another type of antigen, antigen A. And so group O, for example, doesn't have any antigens. And so that makes them a good donor for almost anyone. And so if you find someone with an O negative, let's say blood type, they would be someone that can potentially donate blood to just about anybody. All right, so how do we get blood around the body? How do we get the cardiovascular system to distribute blood everywhere around the body in order to deliver oxygen and other components to where they need to be? Well, that's where the heart comes in. The heart is essentially a two-chamber pump, and it is responsible for creating blood pressure and moving the volume of blood all around the body. So we're going to find the heart in the pericardial cavity, right in the middle of your chest, and flanking it will be the lungs. And we'll be able to see how the lungs and the heart work together to move blood around the body and to oxygenate the blood before it gets distributed. All right. So on the screen you can see that we have a few structures here. On the left side, you'll see the inferior and superior vena cava, and this is where the blood enters the heart. And it enters through this structure on the left side called the atrium. We have the right atrium there. This is where blood comes in, and once it starts to pool there and accumulate, it then moves to the right ventricle just below the right atrium. And as it pulls there, it then gets ejected into the pulmonary circuit. And so you can imagine that this is where the blood is going to the lungs to be oxygenated. And once that happens, it then returns back to the heart on the other side. And so on the left side here, you can see that the blood comes back in through the left atrium. And as it pulls there, it then moves into the left ventricle. And then from the left ventricle, it gets ejected into the main artery, the aorta, at the top. You see that large arch where the blood gets ejected from the left ventricle into the aorta. And after the aorta, it then gets spread all around the body, and it's able to circulate. So we just alluded to some of the main circuits in the cardiovascular system. There's the systemic circuit, which transports oxygen to the tissues and returns deoxygenated blood back to the heart. And there's the pulmonary circuit, which we mentioned before, which then sends deoxygenated blood to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart to be distributed. So we have these two circuits that work together to circulate the blood in the body and also oxygenate the blood as they pass through the lungs. So I'd like you to notice something in particular about the thickness of the muscle of the heart. If you take a look at the heart on the right ventricle, you'll see that the thickness of the muscle on that rightmost wall is very thin. And then when you look at the thickness of the left ventricle, you'll see that it's much thicker than the right. And the reason for this is that this is where the oxygenated blood is ejected into the body or into the aorta to be distributed. And this is our high pressure side of the heart, high pressure side of the circulatory system, which needs the force to eject the body and push the blood around. And so in order to accomplish that, it has the thicker muscle. It does more of the work to create the blood pressure. All right, so moving next, we should talk about the valves. And so there's two sets of valves that I wanted to take a look at. The first is the atrioventricular valve. You can find that between the atria and the ventricles. You have a tricuspid valve on the right, and you have a bicuspid valve on the left. And then let's go on and talk about the semilunar valves as well. You have the pulmonary on the right, and you can imagine this is where the blood gets ejected into the lungs, pulmonary lungs. And then you have the aortic valve on the left, and you can imagine this is where the blood gets ejected into the aorta. The aorta is where the blood gets distributed, the oxygenated blood gets distributed. So an interesting thing that I'd like you to notice about these valves is their shape. You see the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves, they kind of form a cup when they're closed. And what happens here is that the weight of the blood actually helps the valve stay closed, and it also prevents blood from backflowing the wrong way inside of the heart. And so you have this loop of blood going in one direction through the circulatory system and delivering the goods that it needs to deliver. So next, let's talk about the action potentials in cardiac muscle. So you remember that cardiac muscle has gap junctions to quickly allow action potentials to move from cell to cell. Well, these action potentials need to be coordinated. And so what we have here is a system of nerves specifically for the heart that controls the timing of how blood enters and leaves the heart. And so on the screen you can see the network of nerves that are made up in the heart and the shape that they form around and in the heart muscle. And so these nerves innervate the heart muscle. And so the nerve signal starts with the sinoatrial node. So the SA node, towards the top of the heart, it starts the action potential, and after a delay, it then sends a action potential down to the AV node, the next node down the chain. And once the SA node receives that signal, it opens the, as you can imagine, the atrial valves. And when the AV node receives that action potential, it opens the ventricular valves. Okay, so we have this coordination of opening and closing the valves in a particular order in order to allow blood to enter the heart and leave the heart in one direction. So another difference with the action potential of the heart versus another muscle is how long the plateau is on the cardiac action potential. So when you have a muscle, let's say the bicep, the action potential is actually pretty fast. The action potential is sent, it fires off, and the muscle contracts, and then we're done. For a cardiac muscle, it's a little bit different. The plateau phase actually sustains for a little bit. And holds its peak in order to eject as much blood as possible, and then at the end of that action potential, it, like other muscle action potentials, starts to relax so that it can go back and do the same thing in another cycle. Okay, so where are the action potentials coming from? Well, we should know that there's two innervations or two sources for these action potentials. The first would be coming from the vagus nerve. You remember the cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve sends a parasympathetic action potential down to the heart to decrease the heart rate, maintain the heart rate, keep the heart rate going as we're doing something that's not so intense. And then when we have, let's say we're going to jump on a bike and we want to increase our heart rate, we want more blood, more oxygen delivered throughout the body, that's when the sympathetic nervous system jumps in and sends an action potential to the heart and says, hey, it's time for us to increase activity. And so we have a variety of ways to measure these action potentials as they're going through the heart. And one popular, probably the most popular way of measuring these action potentials is with an electrocardiogram, which can actually isolate the P wave, the QRS complex, and the T wave. So we can see the entire cardiac cycle from the electrocardiogram, and we can see when the atrioventricular valves open and when the semilunar valves open or close. And even if we had a stethoscope to someone's heart and we're listening, we can hear when the AV valves close and when the SL valves close, and we can actually match it to what you're seeing on the screen, the ECG reading as well. So we have a good sense of how the heart is able to pump the blood around the body and keep the cardiovascular system going.